Thank you, Chair. Board Member Spellich. Board Member Bhat Patel.
Here.
Board Member Becker.
Here.
Alternate Board Member Sanella.
Here.
Vice Chair Garcia.
Here.
Chair Melendez.
Here.
I will note Board Member Figueroa and alternate Board Member Sanchez are absent.
Wonderful. Thank you for alternates for joining today. Now I may ask for you to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now we'll open up for any board member comments and announcements, just looking down the line here. Awesome. Good to see everybody. And we'll move for public comment. Any public comment at this time?
We do have one speaker, John Mosier.
Wonderful. Come on to the podium, John. Sure.
Hello, my name is John Mosier. I'm from San Marcos, California. I'm here basically as a representative for our mobile home parks, San Marcos Mobile Home Resident Association. I've been researching energy backup storage for a while, trying to figure out how to give our mobile homes independence. I had the opportunity to speak to Barbara Boswell a few years ago about it, and I've watched and seen that now we have programs through CEA, like the Solar Plus. I submitted a request to find out who serves our mobile home parks, whether they converted over to CEA or if they're still buying the energy through SDG&E. I have some resident-owned parks, and I have some like ours where we have an owner and we have like a master meter. So I'm trying to find out that reference to what happens with actual meters in the park and some adjustments that way. So I sent that request into the staff. I just want to let you know why I'm doing it. I'm trying to find out where we stand on it. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. And we will next go to approval of the minutes. I would entertain a motion for approval. So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Now we'll have a vote.
Board Member Spellich.
Yes.
Board Member Bhat Patel.
Okay.
Board Member Becker.
Yes.
Alternate Board Member Sanella. It's up to you if you. Vice Chair Garcia. Chair Melendez.
Aye. Thank you. Now we'll move on to our first item under consent calendar. Our consent calendar will be approved in one motion. Are there any speakers on the consent calendar from the public and any items from the board that they would like to pull?
We do not have any speakers on the consent calendar.
All right.
I move approval of the consent calendar.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Board Member Spellich.
Aye.
Board Member Bhat Patel.
Aye.
Board Member Becker.
Yes.
Alternate Board Member Sanella.
Yes.
Vice Chair Garcia.
Yes.
Chair Melendez.
Yes. And great approval. Thank you all. I just wanted to make a note, really positive advancement to our JP Morgan line of credit, right? Continuing to get great business done here at CEA and getting more and more support and strength every day. So moving on to our reports, we have item 5, Clean Energy Alliance CEO report. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Chair Melendez, members of the board. This is the CEO report for this month's meeting. Just a quick update on the enrollment activities for Oceanside and Vista. As I reported last month, the pre-enrollment for net energy metering has concluded. So we are basically wrapping up the final enrollments of those net energy metering customers. As I also reported last month, we've been enrolling about 1,800 of those customers per month over the past 12 months. The statistics for the two cities as of April 8th are shown below. We have a total participation rate of 94.3% of combined between the two cities. with 6,485 opt-outs total. So still a strong participation rate. This shows the enrollment by member city of all the 3 products that we offer: 50% renewable, 750 customers, Clean Impact Plus, our default product of 75% carbon free at 251,772, and Green Impact 100% renewable at 1,053 customers. So good to see those numbers. Just a brief update on our Solar Plus program. That's where we offer solar panels and a battery at no upfront cost to our customers. We have 16 active applicants, 4 are complete as of yesterday. This is a breakdown here by member city of the different applications. And I would like to note this in the footnote there that we began the process of enrolling our channel partners to broaden the scope of contractors who are eligible to offer the program. And we've got our first enrollment of a new contractor just yesterday, and we have several of those agreements that were signed this week. So this we expect to really broaden the exposure of the program and increase enrollment. So excited about that. Staff is still heavily involved this month in particular, as it's Earth Month and Earth Day this week. We have quite a few activities and events we participated in. There you have the list of activities at the end of last month and beginning of this month. Quite a few engagements, including a presentation to the Carlsbad City Council's Legislative Committee, where we updated them on active legislation on the energy side. Today is a big event also in the city of Carlsbad, the Grays event that if you haven't been, it's a pretty neat event and our staff are going to attend that. Several of us did last year. It's a good networking and event. We also attended this week the Del Mar Climate Symposium, which was a very interesting event to attend. And then looking ahead, I mentioned the Grays at the Fields. Dr. Bronner's, who is one of our Green Impact champions at 100% renewable for that company, is having their Earth Day extravaganza tomorrow. And the Del Mar Sustainability Advisory Committee we're presenting to next week. So the next portion of this CEO update is really informational. And as part of our energy programs plan, we have enlisted True North to conduct, or we did enlist True North to conduct a survey to see how the board might want to focus our energy programs. And later in this meeting, we'll hear about the strategic plan and the work plan and have a discussion about program budget. And I think all of these discussions and these activities are coalescing really well together as we prepare our next year's budget to give the board more information about how, when, and to what programs the board would like to see some of the funds go. And so Timothy McClarney from True North is here, and he'll take over this next portion of the update just to give you an overview of the survey results, which I think are quite interesting.
Thank you, Greg, and good afternoon, members of the board. Tim McClarney, president of True North Research. We are a firm that is located here in North County. For more than 20 years, we've been specialized in working with public agencies and using surveys to help them develop a statistically reliable understanding of the communities and the customers they serve. Over 1,500 surveys to date for public agencies, and within those, happy to report that we have a sort of a specialty within the public utility space, so energy as well as water and wastewater. I was doing a little quick math before I came over here, and I realized that we've conducted over 200,000 interviews for public utilities of their customers. And so I mention that mainly because as I go through this presentation or perhaps in response to questions from the board, I may make reference to how, what we're seeing here compares to what we might have seen in another district or so. And I just wanted to give you a sense from the experience base from which I'd be speaking. These results are hot off the press. We were in the field until late last week. We literally just got the data on Monday. And so this is our first cut at the results. And so there is a more detailed report that is forthcoming. I've started working on that today. And it'll provide a lot more information than we'll be able to share in this presentation in terms of how these results break down across subgroups of CEA customers. But that said, I think we've got about 16 slides that cover the main findings of the survey. And as I go through this presentation, I welcome questions from the board as I go or at the end, whichever is your preference. Okay, so before we jump into the actual results, helpful to take a quick moment to talk about the methodology of the survey or how we went about conducting the study. We always want to think first about how do we structure our sample, right? So that's really the key to having statistically reliable results is you want to make sure you have a random representative sample of customers. So we started with the entire customer database that was provided to us by the Clean Energy Alliance. We then use a process called stratification, where we are breaking it down by geography, since you have 7 member agencies, as well as residential and commercial customers. Once we did that, we randomly selected within strata to make sure that we had the right balance of customers in our sample, both geographically as well as by account type. After that, we reached out using 3 different recruiting methods: email, text, and telephone. The email and the text messages had a hyperlink that a respondent could click to come in. Each one of those hyperlinks is unique, and that's what allows us to protect the integrity of the sample. Only those customers that were sent an invitation could access the site, and they could complete it one time only. Folks had the opportunity to participate by telephone, if that was their preference, or online, as well as in the residential side in English or Spanish, whichever they preferred. We were contracted to do 400 completed interviews. We walked back in the door with 509. We had a better response to this survey than we had expected from customers. And so we just passed that extra productivity and productivity on to you without any additional charge. The nice thing about having a slightly larger sample size is it reduces our margin of error due to sampling. In this case, we're sitting at plus or minus 4.3% at the 95% confidence level. So what that means is we can be 95% confident that the results I'll share with you today are within 4.3% of what we would have found had we spoken with all of your customers. Okay, so on to the results. We like to open up the survey with some sort of high-level questions that get them thinking about their community and local issues. The first of which was, just to begin, what would you say is the most important issue or challenge facing your community today? This is where I need to put my glasses on. This is an open-ended question, meaning that we don't provide them with the list of issues you see there on the slide. We simply ask them to tell us in their own words what the most important issue is, so it's top of mind. And then we go back through the verbatims and review those verbatims and group them into the categories that you see here. So we had about 1 out of 4 customers say nothing really comes to mind as far as an important issue or challenge facing my community. Among the rest, though, here you can see that issues of cost and affordability really rise to the top of the list. So we have high cost of living and affordability at 20%, high cost of electricity specifically at 11%. Mentions of government issues and political issues being the biggest challenge right now at about 9%. We're back into high utility.
One question.
Sure.
You know, I see a top level here, high cost of electricity. I think the way we identify ourselves in this type of survey really matters, right? So do they know who they're responding to? Do they understand who we are?
Yeah, so the invitations to the survey were branded from Clean Energy Alliance, so they know who they're talking to. So you will see that rise a bit in there because of that, because they know who you're talking to. We get the same thing when we work with water utilities, that you'll see that if they know who they're talking to, they'll mention that. That said, if you look at kind of the collection of issues at the top of the list, you'll see that cost shows up here quite a bit.
Absolutely.
And
Thank
we're
you
going
for
to see that
clarifying
theme again and again and again as we go through the results. And then, you know, after the government political issues, we're back in again to issues of sort of high utility rates in general or housing affordability and availability. So again, this is top of mind, what comes from your customers without prompting. After that, though, we do prompt them on a series of 10 specific issues. We say, okay, you know, for each one of these, please tell us how concerned you are about this issue. Are you very concerned, somewhat concerned, slightly concerned, not at all concerned, or you don't know or have no answer? And here again, you know, when you look at this list of 10 issues, the ones that rise at the top of the list right now, cost of living in general, cost of electricity, paying for essentials like food, gas, and electricity. And then you move into addressing homelessness, protecting the environment, traffic congestion, air pollution, climate change, and greenhouse gas emissions. At the very bottom of the list, there's the pace of construction and development. So that gives you a sense of how they rank these relative issues. I will say that I've seen it, you see it in this survey, but I've seen it in a lot of other surveys that we do for public agencies around the state. The issue of homelessness, it wasn't even on the radar prior to 2016. It really peaked a few years after that. We're actually starting to see that issue come down a little bit in terms of overall saliency. It's still a top issue in a lot of places, but it seems to have peaked and come down a bit.
Yeah, quite a quick question. So, and I think you mentioned it, but you said that when asking these questions, you were asking about locally or in the state or federally or just in general?
The first one was about their community. So what's the biggest issue or challenge facing your community? That was the last slide. So they are thinking about their community.
Okay.
This one is phrased as, I'm going to read a list of specific issues for each one. Please tell me how concerned you are about the issue, right? So how concerned are they about each one of the issues there on the slide? We tend to find people localized, right? They're thinking about, their existence and their experiences. And so, and you tend to also see in this survey that the more either a program or an issue sort of has a nexus back to them as a customer, it tends to rise on the list. The more it's a little broader, like addressing climate change in general, right? It tends to.
And I ask this because my concern is, addressing homelessness. When I speak to people and constituents, I mean, people saying the cost of electricity might be 1 out of 10, as opposed to addressing homelessness, which is 9 out of 10. And so I'm sure you guys did everything right, but my concern is, as you mentioned, I think they know who we are, so that's probably top of mind, because I can't imagine that homelessness is below cost of electricity. I don't know if I'm unique just because Escondido has a bigger issue, but
No, I hear you. That's why I wanted to know, how are we presenting ourselves in this? And
Yeah.
I think maybe as, Clean Energy Alliance, we might assume that the respondent is sharing a little bit more of their feelings about energy and cost of living.
yeah, I agree. And again, the issues might be different on the coast than it is in the inland, but that's just my perception. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
And I don't disagree. And as we talked about, I think a little earlier, is because they know who they're talking to, right? And energy issues are going to be a little more top of mind in this particular survey than if they were, say, talking to their school district.
Mhm.
Okay. So we did, one of the interesting things about sort of special districts and JPAs is they often sort of don't have the level of awareness. They sort of fly under the radar a lot of times. And so, we asked in this survey whether prior to taking the survey, they were aware that the energy their household or business uses is provided by the Clean Energy Alliance. You see that 78% of the customers took the survey said, yes, we're aware of that. 18% said no, they weren't aware of that fact, and you had about 4% who were not sure or not to answer. This is aided recall, so it's a little different than unaided recall, right? If you'd ask the question to say, name for me, right? The organization that provides your electricity service, you're probably going to have a lower read, because the unaided recall was sort of a tougher test. Aided recall, they hear the name, they will tell you whether prior to taking the survey they were aware of that or not.
Did you ask any other organizations or agencies? Like, did you ask, are you familiar with SANDAG? Are you familiar with SDG&E? Or did you just say CEA?
It was just CEA in this survey.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so after this, at this point in the survey, early on, those questions were broader, right? They were, tell us what the most important issue is to you, and how do these various sort of broad issues, some of which are related to electricity, some of which are not, how they rank. At this point in the survey, it really narrows to energy-related questions and issues. And so the first of these questions simply ask folks to tell us, for each of the items on this list, how important is this issue to you or your business? Keeping in mind that some commercial customers are in this mix as well. They're asked in a random order, but they are sorted from high to low here based on the combined percentage of folks who said it's either extremely or very important. And what's interesting about this list is, if you look at, say, the top 4 relative to the others, any issue that ties back to the customer, right, to their home or their business, ranks higher in this list than those that don't have as direct a nexus. So the top 4 issues are reducing their homes or businesses' energy costs, having cleaner air to breathe in their home or building, avoiding power outages at your home and business, and receiving a discount on your energy bill if you use less energy during peak periods. Right? So all 4 of those sort of directly tie back to that customer. The rest are a little broader, right? So generating more electricity locally through rooftop solar or other small installations, addressing climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions, ensuring low-income households and underserved populations have the same opportunities to transition to clean energy, as well as providing good-paying jobs in the energy sector. Although these are supported, right? They're seen as a priority. They're, comparatively speaking, they're not as important to your customers as the top 4 there. And then having measured kind of the importance of these various energy related issues to your customers, the survey now transitioned to a list of initiatives or actions that could be taken in the future for their community. And so for each one of the items you see on that list, we simply ask them to tell us, is this a high priority, a medium priority, or a low priority for your community, or should this not be a priority at all? Again, asked in a random order, but sorted here from high to low based on the combined percentage. You said it's either a high or medium priority. At the top of the list here, we see updating the electric grid. So this is really about taking care of the infrastructure, right? So upgrading the electric grid infrastructure, including undergrounding utility wires, expanding grid capacity, replacing outdated equipment. We do a lot of work around the state on voter initiatives, and the one thing you will find is that if you rank all the things that folks are willing to sort of invest in, taking care of the facilities that you already have is usually at the top of that list, right? We don't necessarily need something shiny and new. We want to take care of what we have. That was followed by improving energy efficiency of buildings so they use less energy and have lower energy bills, and then creating more backup power systems that can operate during a power outage. As you get to the bottom of the list, you tend to see things here that are maybe not for, if I'm a customer and I don't have an EV, for example, increasing the number of public access charging stations of electric vehicles, not going to be as high on my priority list, right? And so those items towards the bottom of the list tend to have a little narrower focus in terms of, it depends on what kind of use the customer has. All right, so up until this point, it's been a lot of sort of broader community-related questions. At this point in the survey, it really focuses on the customer themselves, their household or business, and sort of their awareness and interest in programs. So the first question of this series was simply for each of the items that you see there on that list, which are energy improvements to their home or business, which do their current home or business have? And what you can see here is, energy efficient lighting, pretty common. 78% of customers said that they have that. 55% have some sort of weatherization improvement, right, with insulation, windows, or roof improvements. And then solar panels, as well as a smart home energy or building management system. About 4 out of 10 customers said they had that. Beyond this, you see it really trickles down to either 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 4 customers. Electrification, so electric stove, electric heat pump, water heater, EV charging station, an electric furnace, or backup battery storage. It's anywhere from 18% to 26% have each of those items. So we asked respondents, as we shifted into the program section of the survey, we asked them to tell us in general how informed they feel about the programs and services that are available to help residents and businesses with energy-related improvements. You can see a little over half of customers said that they felt at least somewhat informed, with 15% saying they felt well-informed. Regardless of how they answered this question, we went on to ask for each of the programs that you see here on this list, whether they were aware that this program was available prior to taking the survey. I will note that there's certain programs in here that are appropriate for a residential customer, not for a commercial customer, and there's some that are appropriate for people who own single-family homes and townhomes, for example, but not necessarily folks who are living in mobile homes or apartments. We tailored the list based on those characteristics so that each one of these items is among the type of customer for which this program would apply. And so awareness was highest for discounted rates for energy used during peak periods, off-peak periods, so your time of use programs, discounted rates for low-income households, as well as rebates and incentives to install solar panels and battery storage. From there, you started to get a little more even split in terms of the levels of awareness for the remaining programs. So same list of programs, we went on to ask customers how much interest they had in that program. So would they describe, was their household or business very interested, somewhat interested in this program? Are they already participating in this program? Perhaps we want to leave that as an option, as well as whether they have no interest whatsoever. Overall, top of the list, rebates and incentives to install energy efficiency lighting appliances and equipment, as well as discounted rates for energy used during off-peak periods, and rebates and incentives to make energy efficiency improvements to their home or business. These were at the top. As you go down the list and you get towards the bottom, again, here we have programs that are more tailored to specific types of customers, which is why probably the interest level really wanes. So those who have medical equipment in their house getting discounted. If I don't have medical equipment, I'm probably not all that interested in that. And the same thing with the EV charging or the low income discounts. Now, there were certain customers who were aware of a program and they expressed that they were their household was interested in that program, but had not participated yet. We followed up with them to ask why, right? Why is it that if you're interested in it and you're aware of it, is there a particular reason or obstacle why you weren't participating to this point? And as you can see here, about half, 48%, said no particular reason. Among the remaining respondents, though, cost was the number one factor at 13%. They'd be interested in the program, but they're a renter, and the landlord's not going to allow them to make that kind of improvement to the property. Or, although they're interested in the program, they don't have as much of a need right now. All right, final substantive section of the survey focused on communication. So I've got a few more slides here and then a couple wrap-ups. So we wanted to gather some information that's going to help the Clean Energy Alliance understand kind of how best to communicate with customers. So the first one here simply asks folks to tell us, what would you say is your primary source for information about local events and programs? Number one was the internet, not social media, at 43%, followed by television at 20%, social media at 14%, and newspapers at 9%. I once asked this question for a water district up in kind of the foothills, and the number one answer was Facebook. And I kind of joked that that's one of the signs, the 7 signs of the apocalypse, when Facebook becomes the number one issue or number one source for information for a community. And we got it 2 years in a row. It was sort of startling. But thankfully, social media here is 14%, and these other issues are more dominant. Specifically with respect to Clean Energy Alliance communications, we asked customers to tell us, among the list that you see here on the slide, how effective would this method of communication be for reaching you as a customer? And at the top of the list, you have email, followed by the Alliance's website. Then you have direct mail to the home, and then e-newsletters, utility bill inserts, and on down. So it gives you a sense. This is something that we have seen shift a lot over the years in terms of what methods of communication that residents and customers find be the most effective. So we're always kind of encouraging our clients to keep a close eye on this because it'll change quickly depending on what the technology out there is. Final substantive question of the survey was an open-ended one as well. And simply, if the Clean Energy Alliance could do one thing to better serve you and or your business, what would that be? Again, open-ended. They could tell us anything that came to mind. Half, 48%, said nothing really comes to mind in terms of how the Alliance could better serve them. 27% mentioned something related to reducing rates and costs, and then 8% requesting sort of more detailed information in terms of their bill breakdowns or rates or programs, right? So they're wanting more detailed information. Okay, so what does all this mean? As I mentioned, we just got this data a few days ago. So this is our first cut at it. We have not had a chance to go into deep detail in terms of analyzing that. That's going to be part of the written report, which is forthcoming. That said, I do think there's a few takeaways from the information that we have so far that you'll see here. The first is, I think, the most obvious, which is, the customers are cost sensitive, particularly in the current environment. And this seems to be their primary motivation, right? So at any point in the survey where cost items could be part of a list, or there was an open-ended question, we tend to see as sort of cost and affordability issues, whether it pertained to electricity or whether it was just more broadly in terms of cost of living. Those things tended to rise to the list. And what you found is that translated into a lot of interest in programs that had some connection to improving their energy efficiency as well as reducing bills, right? So any programs or actions that have that direct link to cost reduction for a customer generated a lot of interest. We did also find that your customers are generally pro-environment and pro-clean energy. That's there, but it's important to recognize that that's sort of a second tier sort of concern and motivation for customers, right? If cost and affordability is number one, the clean energy and sort of pro-environment issues are really a second tier. And because of that, what you tended to find is programs that were directed less towards the customer in terms of helping them with their energy efficiency and their billing, but more broadly in terms of sort of pitched as addressing climate change or perhaps serving another subgroup of customers. Those ones tended to be kind of lower down in terms of the interest and the priority ratings for your customers. We did see that most customers have made what I would call modest energy improvements. They've sort of captured the low-hanging fruit, right? So we're talking about energy efficient lighting and some limited weatherization improvements to their homes or businesses. But there's seemingly a lot of room for improvement in that area. A lot of the other energy efficiency improvements that could be made to a building, few customers tended to have invested in that at this point. And then finally, sort of consistent again with their interest in and their sensitivity to costs, a majority of customers express interest in either incentive programs or rebate programs for the things that you see on the final bullets there, right? I would say that also, again, we're seeing this in some of the other research that we're doing for other agencies. I think we're also a little bit in a bubble right now of people being really sort of cost conscious, right? And thinking about affordability and thinking about costs, right? And, for a variety of reasons. And so that's the other thing to sort of layer on to this is it was taken in a period of time where obviously we have tariffs, there's concern about inflation, you've got a lot of volatility in the stock market. And so we saw this period, I saw this also probably in the winter of 23 a lot. There was a period of time where all of a sudden you could see in the public that they were just a little more zeroed in terms of the dollars and cents of things, and that was taking precedent. So with that, I end my presentation. I welcome any questions if there are any.
Thank you. We'll definitely have some questions and comments. I wanted to see if there were any public comments on this item.
We do not have any speakers on this item.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this. I really look forward to the full report and analysis, but from this initially being able to see how our customers perceive the issues and potentially what they would like us to do, with their concerns is very interesting. I have a couple notes here, but you just really want to hear from the whole board. This is very fascinating. We will be having ongoing discussions about programs, not only in this item, but later on in the agenda as well. So let's just make our rounds here. Yes, Member Spellich.
I had a question. I didn't notice it, and if you did it, I'm sorry, I missed it. Did you get a sense in the survey participants understood that they were largely would have been enrolled in CEA? Because with the numbers of enrollments, most of the people you were talking to likely were members of CEA. Were they conscious of that?
They were all enrolled, right? So we didn't deal with folks who weren't part of CEA. It was only customers that are enrolled. And as we saw there, a high percentage, I think it was 78%, were aware that prior to taking the survey, they were enrolled with CEA.
They were aware of CEA, but were they aware they were in CEA?
Well, That's a good question. I think throughout, we never asked that specific question, right? But in the survey, there's a number of questions that make that clear to them as it's going, right? Because, at the beginning, for example, of the phone interview, if somebody, if they said, hey, I don't recognize the Clean Energy Alliance, there's a little blurb here about, the city of whichever city they're in, right? Joined with several other North County cities to form the Clean Energy Alliance. And although SDG&E delivers electricity to your home or business and manages billing, the energy your house and business receives is purchased by the Clean Energy Alliance. So if they weren't aware of it up front, they were provided an explanation of sort of what CEA is and they are enrolled. So they knew that coming through.
Well, the takeaway I had was we as an organization have work to do on getting the message out about what we do, what we bring, with the cost sensitivity that creates some potential problems getting people to opt up to the higher tiers.
Mhm.
But I love this bit about the rebate and incentive programs, and it seems like that would be an area worth hitting to be able to get at some of these concerns about cost.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. I agree that rebates and programs are one of the ways we can communicate to the customer about what we do and who we are. Any other comments and questions? Yes. Vice Chair.
Yeah, thank you again for the information. I think as Chairwoman said, I think we're going to be able to use this for quite a bit. I did have a few questions and comments. Can we go back to the slide that asked if they are aware of it and why they haven't enrolled in anything? That one right there.
Oh,
2, 3 now.
Here.
That one right there.
okay.
Yeah, so this comes to mind, this has to do with my previous question too, is that if I'm to be honest, I don't think people are aware of the Clean Energy Alliance. I think they just know the name because it's on their bill. Because if we're looking at 50% are saying that they're not sure why they haven't participated, I think a big reason why is because they don't even know about the programs. And if you go to the previous slide, this right here, I mean, and this is not the fault of the surveyor by any means, but I just don't think, and this has to do with what we've been saying, where I think there's a lack of information or education out in the public, because if people knew about the rebates, about, different programs, about replacements and everything like that, I think there would be a higher participation rate. Or even if they did it, if they were educated on it, the answer wouldn't be they don't know or not sure. They would probably be saying it's the cost, it's the issues with HOA, it's et cetera, et cetera. So that's my first concern is I'm not sure how we could word this differently to make sure that's filtered out in a different way. The second thing is we're looking at renters and homeowners as well. When you ask the question about if they are, what kind of installations they've done or what they've done in order to improve energy efficiency, most renters aren't going to know because they're not going to be educated on it if they're not investing in it in their, on their own. If I'm renting a house, I don't know if there's a heat pump or there's a motor or, if the double pane windows
Right.
are going to be insulated, et cetera, et cetera. I'd like to see respondents that are homeowners, and not just that, but when the question asks, are you familiar with the Clean Energy Alliance? Did the surveyor, did you all rate it? How familiar are you with CEA, or is it, are you familiar with CEA?
So let me get to that question here. So by the way, we do have a renter or owner flag in the data.
Okay.
That's going to be part of the more detailed analysis along with a lot of other subgroup
Yeah.
breakdowns, right? So
I think that's
sometimes
important.
when you're bundling this together, sometimes the interesting stuff happens when you break it out by subgroups. Right?
Absolutely.
And
Because they'll be more invested if they're a homeowner as opposed to a renter, and they'll know what programs they're invested in or what's been done, modifications have been done to their homes.
Right. And some of these, as I mentioned, if there was a program that didn't apply to, say, an apartment, right? We didn't ask people who live in apartments this, and obviously apartments tend to be highly correlated with renters.
Sure.
It's more the single family home that somebody's residing in.
Sure.
but they're a renter. Sometimes, depending if it's a long-term renter, they'll think about these programs. Other times they won't. It was a simple yes/no question. It was prior to taking the survey, were you aware that the energy your household and business uses is provided by the Clean Energy Alliance?
I think that's important too. I think in the future, if we rate it to see how familiar they are with the Clean Energy Alliance, because again, somebody could say they're familiar with Clean Energy Alliance because again, they see it on their monthly bill. It doesn't mean they know about the programs. And I think that's important too, because if you were looking at, if we were to break it up and rank it and look at people who are either somewhat familiar or very familiar with the CEA, then there'd be a lot more, we could actually be able to determine whether or not they are participating in programs, clean energy programs, if they're opting up, if they're doing installations, whatever it is, because then we could correlate familiarity with the CEA,
Right.
their education with CEA, and the programs that they're enrolling in, because then we are able to determine, does education affect their ability to, or their willingness to enroll in these programs?
Right.
And I just, because again, I think you're going to get close to 100% of people. I mean, we saw the number earlier. I think it was what is 85%? 80%? Yeah. So 80% saying that they're familiar with it. And I know that's not right.
Well,
And I know it's not right because I talk to people every day about energy, and I would say maybe 1 in 10 know what the clean energy actually is, other than somebody who's costing them the money.
I think both can be true in the sense, and we see this all the time when we're looking at special districts or JPAs or, CCAs. There's an awareness, right? Oh yeah. I mean, I'm aware that I'm getting, or I've heard of the Clean Energy Alliance. How familiar would you say you are? Not really, right?
Right.
And so you could, in other words, it's a very shallow level of awareness, right?
Yes.
They'll recognize the name, they'll understand that they're involved in the energy to their home, but deeper than that, a lot of times the level of familiarity falls off. And I think you're right. You probably would find that, there's this natural correlation that happens between those who are digging in and finding out more about CEA are also finding the programs and participating in programs. So we do see that in other areas.
Right. So I had a few more, but I think that's good for now. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Continuing board comments?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say that, this is a good beginning stage and, we have finally just rolled out our last couple of cities and people are starting to get to know us. And I think this survey is just meant to tell us that, now's the time we're going to start these programs. People want some information. We've got a website, we've got more stuff on the website, and we don't have all of these programs. So it's not like they could have said that I'm, enrolled in the rebate program because we don't have those yet. So as soon as we have them, I think this just tells us exactly what we know is that education is good and it's going to, we're going to be starting much more education. I think we've been involved with rolling out, getting it to the cities, and now it's kind of a change of pace. And so this is a good thing to look at, a good plan to look at and say, yeah, people are interested. They would like lower rates and secondly, some rebates or programs. So really appreciate the work.
Certainly. And then I will say that we do, one of our biggest clients is the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, so SMUD, which is, I think, the 6th largest municipal energy provider. And we've been their on-call market research firm for almost 2 decades. And so we've just done an enormous amount of research for them. Really interesting work, Department of Energy funded pilot programs, all this really neat stuff. The reason I'm saying that is from that research, one thing you will find is that the folks who participate in your programs, they're the ones that are also going to sort of have the most positive opinions of the organization, right? And so the more you can bring them in and get them involved in that, it also sort of pays dividends in that way as well.
Thank you. Member Patel?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. And I'm sure you can tell we're all very passionate and excited about the data that you presented. I think one of the things that I wanted to just add on to, it's more comments. I don't think I necessarily have questions, is that when you do have that more drilled down information, I think it would be beneficial for the rest of us. And I'm sure it sounds like we will see it at some point. I think having the ability to see, so I'm a data nerd also, not necessarily in this particular realm, but in public health. And I think just being able to see, like the homeowners, the renters, the differences between the data and just understanding all of that will be helpful for us as we look at our constituencies and continue to try to figure out, okay, how can we make sure we're meeting folks where they're at? Because a lot of it is going to come down to the awareness piece. I think it's really making sure that folks are critically aware of what's going on, but also that they have the ability to, like we were talking about, being involved in some of this decision making that'll help them save money, because it sounds like a lot of the issue was around cost, right? And so even though, yes, there was a bias because they knew, right? Like there was that bias because they knew who was interviewing them. But I think, cost of living, we were just talking about utility rates at the city of Carlsbad. Cost of living is an issue that I think we're all dealing with in the state of California. That's just a day-to-day. And so I wouldn't necessarily think that that's completely skewed per se, at least from my opinion. I hear it every single day that people are dealing with groceries, water rates, other utility rates. So I do think that cost of living is definitely top of mind for folks. Homelessness, of course, is also top of mind. But if we're talking about cost of living, I hear that from folks regardless of where their socioeconomic status is. So I really appreciate this. I'm looking forward to seeing more and how we can really utilize this to ensure that not only our communications are robust, but what we end up putting out for programming, that ends up being something that really can help our community. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, Member Sanella.
I am, first off, I want to thank the organization for seeing that. That's always good. And there's always opportunities to, as you know, Clean Energy Alliance is relatively a young organization. So building that brand of who we're going to be and what we're going to be to our customers, this data will definitely inform some of that. Some feedback I've heard out in the public, and I kind of wonder if it came out in the survey at all, is this misperception that now these customers who have historically written their monthly check to SDG&E feel like they have now two bills. And in reality, they still have one that it may be slightly higher in some cases, maybe slightly lower in other cases.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. But there seems to be, at least with some folks, a misperception that they're now having to pay two different organizations and they're paying twice as much for their energy. Did any of that come out of the?
We didn't see that directly, and in going through the verbatims, we didn't really see that much at all. But I understand what you're saying, and it's sort of ripe for confusion, right? Because you have, wait a minute, we've had SDG&E all these years, and I'm still getting bills from SDG&E, but now somebody else. It's a difficult problem to deal with, right? And I think that's why sort of clear, simple communications on this. And I've been on your website a lot as I've started this process, and I think that there's some good content there. And I think you do actually do a pretty good job of simplifying some of it, but maybe some of that needs to be like front page type of information, right? So that way customers, when they try and figure out who you are, okay, I get it, right? They don't have to dig too far to find that.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Member Spelch.
Just a cautionary tale. A lot of these with rebates and things like that being top of the list, I can tell you from personal experience, the Trump administration hasn't paid for the state. The state gives rebates, but those rebates come through the federal government. Those checks have been held up. They haven't flowed. I know people who had work done in January. It's April 20 something, and they still haven't gotten the check because Washington's not cutting the checks. So I only point that out as you want to amp up messaging on that. Let's be careful that the rebates for the programs we're promoting are actually flowing, because as of this moment, I don't think they are.
Absolutely. Thank you all for your comments. It's so important for us to get feedback from our customers as we begin to develop programs. But there's different perspectives, right? There's the customer perspective, there's staff and expert perspective. And, as a board, we get to be that bridge for the community and help to translate some of these difficult topics, right? And I really believe that civic education has very palpable outcomes. I know that we've taken, and for myself and my leadership in my city, a big effort towards educating folks about a variety of issues, right? Everything from, sustainability to traffic calming. And, there are times where we've put so much dedicated effort towards educating the community and making them informed that sometimes, I'll get that email, right, of someone who, I have a question about this. And I wonder, shoot, how did I miss you, right? And everyone should know about this, right? But you don't know about this. So we have to go back and simplify and bring it back to the community. And I do think that this survey, and no survey is perfect, but I think it's a wonderful place to start. And it gives us a ton of information here. And it's a huge reflection of the level of knowledge of our customers, right? Whether they are, a homeowner or a renter, a lot of people are aware of these common energy programs. They're aware of smart lighting, right? And efficient appliances and solar panels. So that, in order to prove themselves in the survey, they might just choose what's top of mind, not necessarily knowing how it translates to our programs. But as we gather this information, we can filter it through and develop programs that are going to be deliverable, right? We do have to consider, how do we finance future programs, and so forth. So I think that what this really helps us do is create programs that are not focused on a niche, right? Not focused on delivering, electric for all EVs, right? As an organization, I think that would go off mission, right? But to serve the greatest number of people as possible, and to reduce the cost burden for our customers as much as possible. So I think that this is a great way for us to move forward with some of those programs. I'm really excited for us to break down the data and allow that to inform our decision making. And thank you so much for this presentation. And I have to give, so much appreciation to our CEO for initiating this survey and giving us this lens into our customers that we hadn't seen before. So thank you, Greg, for that.
I appreciate those comments, and I do want to thank our staff, actually, who often bring these things forward as well. So
Very good.
appreciate their support
Any
on this.
further
This is
comments on the side? Awesome. Let's keep moving on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before we wrap up the CEO report, I don't have slides for it, but in your CEO report, I just wanted to make a comment about the employee recruitment. We've had some final interviews this week to replace, well, I don't think we could ever replace Kaylin, but we do have somebody hopefully coming in this week. And we also have final interviews on the the key accounts and programs specialist and analyst positions tomorrow. So we got quite a good response, and we hope to begin interviews, I think, next week or the week after for the energy side. So just wanted to report on that as well, even though there's no slide for that.
Thank you for that update.
And by the way, to answer just to respond, as far as the incentives, that we are going to be onboarding an incentive finder on our website for customers to more readily be able to search for those kinds of incentives, and they will be delineated by state, local, federal, so customers will have an idea. And of course, if there is updated information as to what rebates are still active or are challenging, we'll try to make that information available as well.
Thank you. There we go. That concludes item 5. We'll move on to item 6, our regulatory update from Keys and Fox.
Thank you. And this board chair and members of the board is going to be provided remotely by Jake Schlesinger, and Jake is up there on your screen. And go ahead, Jake.
Great, thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. And I believe that there is a slide deck queued up. Great. Good afternoon, Chair Melendez and members of the board. My name is Jake Schlesinger. I'm a partner at Keys and Fox. I work closely with Tim Lindell and other members of our team to supervise CEA's regulatory advocacy efforts before the California Public Utilities Commission. And I'm here today to just give a quick update on some recent developments on a few matters that we have been focused on recently. Next slide, please. So today I'm just going to address two issues. One is the power charge indifference amount rulemaking that's recently been opened at the commission, as well as an anticipated application from SDG&E on split billing. I think I just heard something about that from one of you. And so let's move on to the next slide, where I will just give a quick update on the PCIA rulemaking. We received a Track 1 scoping ruling from the commission. Tim Lindell did update you about this proceeding the last time he presented. But now we know that in Track 1 of this proceeding, the commission will be focused almost exclusively on whether and how to revise the resource adequacy market price benchmark. So that is the methodology that the commission uses to forecast the value of RA as it sets PCIA rates for future years. The investor-owned utilities did argue that in addition to that issue, the commission should also consider revising the methodology for forecasting renewable energy values. CCAs and others opposed including that in this Track 1, and the commission ultimately sided with us on that. There will be a Track 2 to this proceeding, but at this point we don't have a scoping ruling on that, though we do expect it to address several issues, some of which we have been advancing for quite some time, including how utility generation is vintaged when a utility invests new money into an existing generation plant whose costs are recovered through the PCIA. So more on that, but next slide, please. I am going to just remind you why this is important for CEA. The PCIA, represented by this blue circle, is calculated by taking the forecast cost of the utility's generation portfolio and subtracting out the forecasted value. And so if that forecasted value goes down, that will increase the PCIA and increase the costs to CEA customers. We do know that the staff proposal would likely reduce the current RA market price benchmarks, disconnect the RA MPBs from current market conditions, and increase costs to CCA customers. So we will continue to advocate against that. Next slide, please. The other issue I wanted to talk about is the split billing issue. Currently, California law requires IOUs to provide all metering, billing, collection, and customer service to CCA customers. SDG&E's Tariff Rule 27, which was approved by the commission back in 2006, requires that SDG&E use a consolidated billing process, so one bill for both CEA services and utility services. However, separate and apart from that, the commission has recently undertaken a revision to its net metering policies for how it compensates customers for on-site solar. Through the course of that proceeding, it was identified that there's some additional confusion among customers about how they are being credited or compensated for their excess solar energy. And so the commission ordered the IOUs to host a series of workshops and to report on recommendations from these workshops by submitting a letter to the Energy Division. However, they were directed to come up with recommendations for long-term improvements to bundled and unbundled net energy metering and net billing tariff, customer bill presentment. Next slide, please. However, what we saw in the letter from SDG&E went significantly beyond the scope of that direction, and requests a separation of bills or calls for an examination into the separation of bills. So two separate bills, two separate envelopes, one for SDG&E services, one for CCA services. SDG&E claims that this will resolve all of the confusion around net metering and net billing tariff issues, but also acknowledges that it'll impact all 1.2 million unbundled customers in the San Diego area. As I noted before, current law does not allow CCAs to perform this billing function. It is assigned to SDG&E, and therefore SDG&E is essentially proposing to provide this as a service to CCAs by sending out CCA bills. And I just wanted to contrast this with what PG&E presented in response to this same directive. I will note that PG&E did also identify structural concerns regarding customer understanding of CCA and IOU charges. I would also note that both SDG&E and PG&E essentially asserted that most customers don't know that they are a member of a CCA. I understand that you just got some information that potentially contradicts that assertion. But rather than calling for a split billing, PG&E merely discusses changes on how to separate CCA charges from its own charges on the same bill, potentially distinguishing those charges through color coding or different paginations. So it is a little unclear on how this is all going to present itself. But we do understand from SDG&E that they plan to submit an application by the end of this year to request this split billing. Obviously, there are a number of concerns with this, customer confusion being a primary one, confusing customers even more, customers asking themselves, why am I getting two bills for my electricity service? Do I have to pay both bills? Which bill should I pay if I can only pay one? That raises concerns about costs to ratepayers, not just the cost of printing two bills and mailing two bills and tracking payments for two bills, but also, any marketing, education, and outreach campaign that would need to accompany this to avoid mass confusion. Also concerns about increased arrearages and risks of disconnections to the extent that customers choose to only pay one bill. And that, of course, could increase costs to all customers through undercollections. And then finally, equity concerns. These concerns can be more pronounced on a paper bill than they could be potentially online. But of course, not all customers have equal access to the internet. So that is a concern as well. So we will continue making our position known. And if and when SDG&E does file its application, we will certainly intervene and oppose that. Next slide. That is the concluding slide in case there are any questions that I can answer for you.
Thank you, Jacob. Do we have any public comments on this item?
We do not have any speakers on this item.
Thank you. I'm sure other board members might have comments, but I just had a quick question. So the clarity in the rules regarding that second item and splitting the bill, on the SDG&E side, that was only to supposedly benefit the solar customers. Is that correct? It wouldn't impact all of the customers?
No, SDG&E is proposing to split the bill for all customers. So essentially, the way that I interpret it is that the commission asked them to resolve a narrow issue on net metering and net billing. And SDG&E said, you know what, it would just be easier if we if we split the billing for everyone. And in doing that, they claim that that will solve the issues that they're hearing about from net metering and net billing. But their proposal is to do it across the board.
I agree with your position that that would be very concerning and lacking clarity for our customers. Any comments from our board?
I'm just curious if they would put the delivery charge on the CEA section of the bill, because actually my electricity portion is very small. So if I just got that tiny little bill from CEA, it wouldn't be that bad to have that split bill. But because it's always the highest charge is that delivery service. So I'm just curious how they would do that.
We haven't seen their specific proposal, but my understanding but based on the letter that they submitted is that there would be one bill for generation service from CEA and a separate bill from SDG&E for delivery services.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for following this, and we look forward to further updates. With no further comments, we'll go ahead and move on to the next item here, item 8, to discuss our rate design and.
Actually, 7,
Oh, excuse me.
hopefully.
Oh, 7, our strategic plan, CEA strategic plan, work plan, and preliminary budget discussion, not to skip ahead.
Thank you, Chair Melendez and members of the board. So this item was brought to you, our strategic plan, back in January of this year, and received broad support with some comments. We were then moving forward to take it to our Community Advisory Committee. We got comments from them. There are, and part of the comments from the board were to, or was to make it available on the website. We created a survey on the website that prompted visitors to the website to take the survey. We got 62 responses. I did not include slides on this, but I did want to just, not surprisingly, the results were where we asked customers to rank the priorities that we outlined in the strategic plan, the objectives and the goals of the strategic plan, those that pertain to affordability, that pertain to lowering energy costs, rose to the top in terms of priority. So that was no surprise to us. However, it was good to see that alignment of that small sample size aligned with the survey results we just got in and are still working through with True North. The strategic plan is a 3-year plan, the purpose of which is to establish a plan that with guiding principles and goals for Clean Energy Alliance from the next fiscal year through fiscal year 27. You may recall that the plan was created by gathering background information from our JPA, our formation documents, Community Advisory Committee meetings, prior board direction, and consolidated into a set of core guiding principles and objectives that we would then create a work plan from. And that is also on this agenda, a draft work plan. The strategic plan development has followed these essential steps: the foundation, establishing the core guiding principles. We developed a mission statement, strategic objectives, and now we're bringing forward a draft work plan. Just as a reminder, these are our core guiding principles. There were 6 to promote use and development of clean energy, build and maintain financial stability, provide beneficial customer programs, actively engage in customer advocacy, provide exceptional customer service and community engagement, and promote organizational development. Some of the comments that we received from the Community Advisory Committee were heavy on the customer advocacy as well as from the board, making sure that we're reaching harder to reach members of our customer base, as well as getting the word out in a variety of forms, which again, the survey you just saw the results of will help us to target some of those segments of our community and customer base with some of our programs and our offerings. At the January board meeting, the board identified its preference for this mission statement. I've included some language in bold, which incorporates both Community Advisory Committee as well as board language that was new to this particular mission statement to empower local communities with the choice of sustainable and affordable energy for all customers, accelerating the transition to clean energy, and fostering local economic growth, environmental responsibility, inclusivity, and community well-being. So that's for your review and consideration. That's, again, taking into account the feedback we received both from the board and the Community Advisory Committee. Moving on to the strategic objectives. Again, I don't want to go through this all specifically, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what our objectives are within each strategic core guiding principle. Obviously, we have a goal to achieve 100% renewable energy by 2035. Sorry, I'm not advancing the slide on this one. And highlight customers that opt up through our Green Impact Champion program. Support customer access to grant-funded and ratepayer-funded energy efficiency programs and pursue local generation projects. We have under our build and maintain financial stability. This is quite self-explanatory. We want to get our feet under us, get sufficient reserves to achieve an investment-grade credit rating. We want to analyze our rate premiums. You'll see that in a discussion later on this agenda. To make sure that the costs for those products are being covered by our rates, offering competitive rates, which obviously is a key component identified in both the online survey as well as the survey True North conducted just recently, and also reducing peak load demand through our efficiency programs. This leads into our beneficial customer programs. And again, there was an emphasis from our input to make sure that we're providing all customers with access to these programs to help reduce bills, providing access to all customers through battery and solar program, which we have done by virtue of our Solar Plus Connect program. Encouraging participation in other state-funded programs where, as you know, and a party to the San Diego Regional Energy Network, as well as the Equitable Building Decarbonization Grant Program in the SoCal region, wanted to expand those opportunities. Actively engaging in customer advocacy, obviously participating in legislative and regulatory proceedings. We just had an update from Keys and Fox, who we meet with weekly. By virtue of approval on the consent agenda, we retained a lobbyist at the state level to help us with legislation on energy. So we're intimately involved in advocacy and monitoring those regulatory and legislative processes in order to advocate primarily on behalf of our customers. Providing exceptional customer service and community engagement, again, increasing our presence in the community. We heard comments just now on discussing the survey results that I deciphered into we need to be out there making sure people are aware of who we are and what we can offer. So we're continually doing that. And then promoting organizational development. And as I mentioned in the update just now, in addition to our 6 full-time staff and our contract CFO, we are engaged with expanding our staff right now to 4 additional positions. So from this, we drafted a draft work plan, really just by taking each of the core guiding principles, and this might be a little bit hard to read, really, I just wanted to, it's in your agenda package, just to show you that for each of the core guiding principles, we outlined each of the objectives. What we've done with the work plan is to include implementation measures, key performance indicators to track our progress. We've identified staff leads, key partners that we will work with to carry out these activities, and then identifying funding sources. That would include grant programs. This showing the next core guiding principle on financial stability, our core guiding principle of customer programs and customer advocacy, and then our customer service engagement, each of which, as you can see, we're developing key performance indicators and measures so we can track our progress. We obviously have key partners on the marketing side with Trepepi Smith, on the procurement side with PEA, regulatory side with Keys and Fox. So really trying to build upon those relationships where possible, and also to bring in any regional funding, such as through the San Diego Regional Energy Network, as well as the Equitable Building Decarbonization Grant Program. And then finally, organizational development. So I can pause there if you have any questions on the strategic plan and draft work plan, if you like, or I can just continue on into the programs discussion. In the staff report, we provide a narrative about the program's budget. We're going to be bringing the draft fiscal year 26 budget to you at the next meeting for approval or discussion in May and then approval in June. Part of that is looking at our programs budget. You may recall that in last fall, we were looking at the possibility of a PCIA rebate to offer to some cities where their PCIA was disproportionately higher than other member agencies. And what we did is we put together this chart that is based upon our JPA, our governing agreement, that states that we shall endeavor to, or the board and CEA shall endeavor to achieve a balanced distribution of program and project benefits substantially commensurate with each member agency's energy load. So what you have here is a breakdown of the current year's programs budget, which is $600,000 allocated by load. And this actually is a little bit different than what was in your staff report. This has been updated through current load provided by Calpine. And the percentages have changed very slightly, just minimally. So they're roughly the same. And what we were intending to show back in the fall was how that 600,000 would be allocated by load. And as you can see, obviously, the larger the load, the greater the allocation. We took that a step further with the PCIA rebate idea by putting forward a proposition that the most impact would be felt by FARA customers. And so we did a further calculation to show that that the amount of benefit per customer would really get distilled down to really, in some instances, and ironically, in the cities where there were more care customers, a very small, almost meaningless benefit. The reason we bring this up now is the program budget in our 5-year outlook, you may recall, looked at increasing the program budget up to $2 million next year and then by $2 million each year thereafter through 2029 fiscal year. So even with that $2 million, when you start doing those calculations, the effect that these program funds may have on a city-by-city business basis is that they may spread those funds too thin. Taking, for example, a battery retrofit program. And by the way, we will be back before you with a battery bonus program, we're calling it. Estimating the cost at about $15,000 per battery. If you start to allocate those by city, even with $2 million, you're really looking at a very few people that could benefit. So the question and feedback we're looking for from the board is whether or not we wait till we build up the reserves, get a stronger financial footing, get a stronger net position, and then start to look at how we might allocate these funds. We're also, as I mentioned, preparing our energy programs plan. We're working through the survey data to see how we can best allocate those resources, as well as how we can best market those resources to the communities that are most in need or most desiring of the programs that we're looking at running or offering. And so looking for board input as to how we manage this moving forward. We're planning to have more discussion on this at our budget meeting in May, as well as in June if necessary, but I offer this to you in the way of getting the board thinking about how we might want to approach this. So after those discussions, we're looking for three actions from the board: adoption of the strategic plan, which is in its final form, and unless there's some specific detailed changes anyone wants to offer, providing feedback and input on the draft work plan for the fiscal years 26 through 27, and providing feedback on the program's budget.
Thank you, Greg. We'll see if there's any public comment on this item.
We do not have any speakers on this
We'll
item.
go to board comments. Member Becker? Member Spellis?
Just a question, that the funds that go back to the cities, are those in addition to any outreach you're doing about building up CEA, or could those also be baked into some of the things we heard from True North about trying to promote driving people to higher tiers and things like that? Do those go hand in hand, or are they separate?
They absolutely go hand in hand. We would fund that outreach though with our operational budget. That's just a staff. I view that as a staff responsibility, but doing both at the same time is absolutely what we plan to do when we bring forward the energy plan with the final survey results.
Yeah, so I would normally be in favor of just building up reserves because there is not a big pot of money, but I would be remiss if I didn't discuss that our Climate and Resiliency Commission in Solana Beach has come up with an idea, and it was to one of these incentive programs where if your water heater breaks and all you care about is getting that back up and running, it might be nice if we incentivize to the contractor, if he sells an electric heat pump to that customer, maybe $200 goes to him, $200 goes to the homeowner. So it's just a small rebate program, but for Solana Beach, $15,000 would compensate, quite a few homeowners. And so I'm not opposed to having maybe each of the cities decide with this small amount of money, what they want to do with it when we're at this point, because that was a suggestion by our commission. So I wanted to bring that forward and see if you guys thought that idea was anything you could support.
Thank you for that suggestion. Any additional comments? I'd love to respond to that. I appreciate the opportunity for each of our cities to contribute to our shared goals, right? We each have a climate action plan, and as a member of this JPA, we want to be able to receive a benefit, right? My concern is small incentive programs definitely can be beneficial. But we have the opportunity with programs to potentially design something that's larger and more sustainable in the long term. And I think that along with looking at small incentive programs and opportunities for cities to dip into maybe a pot of funds that has a cap to it, right? For a small incentive program that staff can return to us, maybe having developed some of those more robust programs as well. And for us to kind of look at the balance of funds that we have available and consider what could we use now and what do we need to put aside in order to really make a true investment. All of us are entitled as cities and as representatives, all of us are entitled to some funding, right? But I really was inspired by the language within the JPA, which says that the board shall endeavor to achieve a balanced distribution of program and project benefits, sustainably commensurate with each member agency's energy load. And so that absolutely could look like, all the cities taking advantage of small incentive programs and kind of doing what they can with the funds that are available. But I believe too that if any of our member cities were to contribute and establish a larger program like community solar, and that reduces energy costs for all of our customers throughout the region, then that would fulfill our agreement to accomplish a balanced distribution. So we could look, I think, at larger programs and projects, but I don't have any opposition to putting that recommendation to staff, seeing if there is small incentive programs that we can endeavor into. I just know that the funding that we have available could also be matched by other cities. I know that our city and the city of Vista, we have potentially public land that, not every city has a lot of space, but in Vista, we do have a little bit. And so we would be willing to, contribute and participate in maybe a community solar program, right? And renewable energy generation. That would certainly be a larger endeavor, taking, several years of building up program funds in order to make that happen. But I don't think that that program and venturing down that road takes away from our opportunity to establish smaller incentive programs as well. I would probably turn it back over to staff and see what can we do to investigate all these different types of programs. And I see comments from Member Garcia.
Yeah, I could support that. I think at least entertaining an idea of something that's more robust. I don't think we necessarily have to move forward with it, but to hear about it, see what options there are, then I do like the matching program. I'm not sure, which cities are going to be able to do that, but at least to explore it. So I'd be willing to explore both of those.
And even just being able to share in the benefit of those programs, right? Our city, for example, we have some funds set aside within our climate action plan, right? And other cities might also have those funds set aside. Some cities have the contribution of land, right? There might be different ways that a city might compete, right? And put forward other resources to bolster the funds that CEA already has. But I don't want to take away from your recommendation, Member Becker, because that could make a huge impact on that top level goal that we saw in the survey, right? Which is people having access to those sustainable appliances. So I really would recommend that staff look at both types of programs, something robust, larger, right, long-term, and smaller incentive programs, which was a great idea from your group there.
And there might be a possibility that each city might benefit from other, different things. Like, let's say, we've exhausted the solar panels in Solana Beach or something like that. We haven't. But so I just want the flexibility to be able to make sure that I'm representing what my city might need to. So that was the only point there.
I completely agree. And I'll just say on that same point, I wouldn't want to force a large solar project into any other city, right? I know my strengths in Vista and your strengths in your city, and we can bring all those to the table. I see Member Patel.
Thank you. So I just want to clarify, could you go to, is it the next slide? Is it the next slide or the slide after where you talk about the reserves? Okay. Thank you. So can I get some clarity from you, Greg, on your thoughts here? From what it sounds like, allocating the funds now to the programs may spread us thin. And so can you maybe elaborate a little bit on that? Just because with all of the economic uncertainty that we're not here at Clean Energy Alliance, but what we're seeing throughout the country, I just want to make sure that when we do have our program funds, that we're able to do so in a way that provides stability to our cities.
Yes, let me. So what I was trying to get at was these are the next projected allocations, and this obviously is subject to board's approval, is with $2 million, let's just say in the next year's budget, and you had, and we'll just take for the sake of argument, let's take the largest percentage of load, and that is Carlsbad at 27%. So that's going to be, I should probably be able to do this in my head, but my brain isn't working too well. $500,000, thank you. Yes, $540,000. And so if just on a battery program basis, and I don't even know if I've got this right, but let's say it's $15,000 per battery, that would be 36 customers potentially that could have that. Might be a good program for you all. I don't know what the uptake would be, but that may be to, again, spreading those funds too thinly over your entire community. So if we wait until later years or build up a reserve and the board decides, okay, we want to allocate, let's forget for now about the breakdown in percentage of load, but let's allocate a chunk of money to this battery retrofit. And I'm just using this as an example. That might get us a lot more people across all the service territory than it would just by city. So that's the thought process. I'm not saying that is a bad thing or a good thing. We can look at, as was suggested, how we might want to divvy this up in terms of what the major kind of programs might be on offer, particularly with the survey research that comes back or data. And then also the smaller programs that don't require an outlay of capital like a battery or a whole solar system. I think what Chair Melendez might have been referring to is even a larger project where we issue an RFP for a battery, solar battery microgrid at a business park that would satisfy some, whether if it's long duration storage, for example, some RA, resource adequacy, or other benefits that are enjoyed by the entire service territory. So we can look at those things. I don't know that we'll have expressly detailed ideas about what that might look like, but we can at least have some scenarios as to what the funding available might look like in the future and how we could allocate those funds.
Thank you.
Hopefully I answered the question.
Yes, I think you did. Mainly as I mentioned, it was more around like making sure that when we do, I know there's that whole saying that we want to make sure when we're doing something that we're doing it in a way that is actually sustainable, right? And so we don't want to start doing something and not put our 100% into it. And so I think that's kind of where I was coming at it from, especially from the economic perspective, is if we start to spread our funds too thin, that's not just from a financial aspect. It would just be like so many other things that fall into that. So I'm obviously open to hearing about more robust programming. I mean, that's the whole point of us talking about programming, is how do we make sure that we're providing that? I think I just want to make sure that we do it in a way that's mindful. And so just wanted to raise that concern. But other than that, very excited about it. Looking forward to hearing other thoughts.
Thank you.
And I guess I would say in response to that, in the treasurer's report on the board package, we're at 21.8 million net position right now. And as we know, we were above our projected budget net position at the mid-year, quite a bit above, I think 13 million, but we're in that downtime of revenue right now. So we're still projected to end this year net positive, which is great. But part of my responsibility is to make sure, as you mentioned, that we're operating in a fiscally sustainable and responsible manner, which is why I'm a little hesitant to start doling out money until, as Board Member Becker just mentioned, we finally just got fully enrolled. We've got our feet under us. Let's get that kind of stability really under us before we start allocating funds. But that isn't to say we shouldn't be planning to do it. And so that's what this process right now is about.
Thank you, Greg. I really feel like we're in the opportunity to develop programs. And so we see $600,000 in front of us, and, those funds we can squirrel away. Those funds we could send directly back to the cities, which I don't think any of us would advise. We can also create pilot programs, right? We can create rebate programs where we can deliver something sooner to our customers. Maybe being able to create a cap for that and really pilot a program. But we can also, invest those monies and future monies into larger infrastructure projects that assist with that resource adequacy. And that for me would be my priority, but I really believe in developing programs. And I think that CEA should have rebate programs. And the programs that I've spoken about the most with Greg and just have envisioned for my city have been those larger infrastructure programs. So I would like to continue to have conversations about how we can develop more of those rebate programs, right? And those smaller, investment of funds to help fill that gap for our customers. So I'm definitely not opposed to developing the programs, but I would, ask that staff prioritizes developing those concepts before we allocate any funds to any particular city. Right, any further comments? All right, thank you all for your contributions here. We'll go ahead and move on to our
Excuse me, Chair, we are looking for adoption of.
action item.
Yeah,
Okay, we have a staff recommendation that I would entertain a motion of. I do approve the work plan and the strategic plan. I'm glad we get to review it once again, and thank you for surveying our community for that. I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve staff's recommendation.
Second?
All right, please vote.
Board Member Spellich.
Yes.
Board Member Bot Patel.
Aye.
Board Member Becker.
Yes.
Alternate Board Member Sinella.
Yes.
Vice Chair Garcia.
Yes.
Chair Melendez.
Yes, and thank you for catching me on that item. All right, continuing to move forward, we have item 8, which is our rate design and premium discussion. We're getting a lot done today, you guys. All right.
Okay, thank you, Chair, members of the board. We have with us today, as part of this, this discussion, we're going to start with a little bit of background on, I thought it was, okay, thanks. Kirby Dussel from PEA, and he's going to give a brief presentation on resource adequacy, a primer, if you will, and just background on resource adequacy, slice a day, and then energy costs, which will lead into the rate design, rate discussion, premium discussion. Kirby.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I hope you're all doing well. Hopefully you can hear me okay. As Chief Executive Wade mentioned, I'm going to go through just a little bit of background about a number of things here. Most importantly, though, is resource adequacy, because when we undertake the discussion about budgeting and rates in particular, you'll find that this particular product, which is compulsory here in the state of California to promote grid reliability, is particularly important and has been over the last several years, as markets have been very dynamic, highly volatile, and have subjected load-serving entities like Clean Energy Alliance to substantial costs in this particular area. But as far as the products that are necessary in order to serve load here in the state of California, you can see there are 4 that we've highlighted here, starting at the top with electric energy. These are literally the electrons that your customers need to turn on their lights, run the various systems in their homes and businesses and so forth. And though this particular product can be purchased in a variety of different ways, and we've highlighted 2 here. One is through term contracts. So these are forward contracts that can be anywhere from days out into years into the future. And typically these term contracts, they specify fixed prices during these delivery periods that are reflected in the agreements, or you can just buy from the market, subjecting yourself to the ebbs and flows of pricing, which can be highly volatile over time. The next product that we'd highlight here is renewable energy, and I think you all are pretty familiar with this one. Clean Energy Alliance is very committed to this particular procurement category and has purchased a great deal of renewable energy since its inception. There are a variety of flavors of renewable energy, if you will, in the state of California that can be used for the compliance mandates that load-serving entities are subjected to. And we'll touch on those briefly in the slide that follows. In addition to renewable energy, we have other clean energy products, in particular carbon-free or GHG-free energy, which largely comes in the form of hydroelectricity here in the state of California. You might ask, well, why is hydroelectricity not included in the renewable energy category? And it's because the state of California has really drawn a line of demarcation in terms of generator size, and only small hydroelectric generators are eligible to participate in the renewable energy program and meet renewable portfolio standards, procurement obligations. Larger hydroelectric generators, they cannot participate in that program, but they can be purchased in order to promote other goals and objectives like reduced greenhouse gas emissions for energy supply portfolios. And then the last item here is really the one that we're going to focus on most today, and that's resource adequacy capacity. Again, this is a reliability product that is compulsory here in the state and is intended to promote grid reliability. All right, so just a little bit more on renewable energy. We won't spend too much time on this, but there are 3 flavors, if you will, portfolio content categories, buckets, or PCCs, as they're known here in the state. The first is substantially California-sided renewable energy or renewable generation that's electrically interconnected to a California balancing authority. So for example, if you had a renewable generating resource located across the California border in Nevada, and there was a tie line to a California balancing authority like the California Independent System Operator as its first point of interconnection, then that would meet the bucket 1 or PCC 1 delivery obligations or requirements. I'm going to skip to bucket 3 because that one's, I think, the next easiest to describe. Bucket 3, those are unbundled renewable energy certificates, or RECs, right? So RECs and renewable energy certificates, that's synonymous. So in this case, unbundled RECs can be of limited use under California's Renewables Portfolio Standard, or RPS program. These are, these are basically environmental attributes sold separately from the underlying electrons. And to be honest with you, Clean Energy Alliance doesn't really buy a lot of these. So they're not all that important for purposes of this discussion. Bucket 2 is really, it's a synthetic product, if you will, which is comprised of renewable energy certificates and then substitute energy that's delivered into the state of California from a different energy source. It's a little goofy, if you will, but it's a product that's of limited use under California's RPS program. It typically is at a cheaper price than bucket 1, which is why it's of interest to a lot of load serving entities, but it does come with an emission consequence that's roughly equivalent to that of a natural gas generator. And I will say, for purposes of Clean Energy Alliance's planning objectives, no bucket 2 was purchased in 2024, and there really aren't any imminent plans to procure that particular product either. And then all the while, as you're buying renewable energy in the state, you need to be mindful of a long-term planning requirement, which necessitates that 65% of all renewable energy purchases are procured through contracts of 10 years or longer in duration. All right, so moving on to the primary subject here, which is resource adequacy. So resource adequacy is, again, it's a compliance product here in the state, the primary purpose of which is to promote grid reliability. So this particular obligation is based on annual load forecasts that are submitted to regulatory agencies each April, with an opportunity to revise those forecasts in the month of May. It's a coordinated effort with the incumbent utility and is basically a joint discussion with regulatory agencies. And these load forecasts, as you might imagine, they change throughout the year, and there are kind of peaks and valleys in these forecasts as you move throughout time. And your resource adequacy obligations are based on the peaks that are in that forecast in each month of the year, plus a planning reserve. And currently, that planning reserve is 17%, but there are proceedings underway that might increase that particular planning reserve. There are discussions that are focused on the low 20% metric, so that would be a pretty substantial increase in not only procurement obligations, but related costs for load serving entities here. And resource adequacy is purchased from generators that are not only located within the state of California, but throughout the Western United States. And I will say, though, that when you purchase capacity from generators located outside of California, there are some additional obligations that flow through to those that are buying that capacity, which necessitate the reservation of transmission capacity in order to ensure that that capacity is available here in the state at the times that it's intended to be delivered. As far as the compliance program itself, there are 2 different cycles that are involved with resource adequacy. There's a year ahead compliance cycle and then a month ahead compliance cycle. And there are different requirements that apply to each of those timelines. For the year ahead process, there's an annual deadline falling at the end of October. And by that deadline, there are certain percentages of your obligations that need to be met in the coming year. And then as you roll in to the next year, there are monthly processes that essentially top off that obligation. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the slide that follows. Recently, California embarked on a change. It was a significant structural change in terms of the way that resource adequacy is regulated. We moved from previously, so this ended in 2024, we moved from a framework that was based on the peak hour of the month, meaning that there was 1 hour in which your customers used energy most intensively, plus that aforementioned planning reserve, and that set the bar for that obligation. Moving into 2025, however, there is an hourly obligation that applies. And I think it's safe to say that regulators, as well as the state generally speaking, found that the dynamics of the grid had changed, the resource composition on the grid had changed, and that it was prudent to start measuring this particular obligation on a more granular level. And we'll see what exactly that means in a couple of slides. Unfortunately, when it comes to buying resource adequacy, it's a decentralized market. In the East Coast, they have a centralized market. There's essentially a clearinghouse. It's a lot more transparent, but here in the state, a lot of bilateral discussions are undertaken with generator owners and operators, as well as with brokers. So it's a little bit more disorganized. It's a little more clunky, if you will. And quite frankly, it takes a lot of time. Dan can tell you that he spends a lot of time on that. So decentralized market as it relates to buying resource adequacy. And then when it comes to buying this particular product, it's sold in both full and fractional megawatts. So you can go buy 10 megawatts from a generator, or you can buy 10 and a half. It's really up to you and what's available from the marketplace at any point in time. All right, I mentioned before that there are two different kind of temporal frameworks for complying with RA. The year ahead and the month ahead. So in the year ahead, I mentioned that end of October deadline that applies. So for example, by October 31st of 2025, we will have met our year ahead compliance obligation for 2026. And in meeting that obligation, we'll need to demonstrate we've purchased 90% of our prescribed need during summer, meaning the months of May through September. So this is a period for the state that's deemed very critical. The state wants to make sure that they have the substantial majority of the capacity that they need under contract amongst load serving entities by that particular point in time. There's also a need to procure what they call flexible capacity, which is basically capacity that can ramp up and ramp down quickly, responding to the needs of customers that vary over time. So you can think of generating fleet much like a fleet of cars, if you will, where you have some cars that they're very good at kind of getting up to speed and operating efficiently over long distances, so long as you don't rev that engine up or down. And then you also have the sports cars, right, which are very good at accelerating quickly, braking quickly, but they're not particularly efficient. And then we have kind of all kind of generators in between. When it comes to flexible capacity, this is really kind of reflective of the generating fleet that can operate nimbly and can be responsive to the changing needs of customer energy requirements. And then here in the SDG&E footprint, there is a local capacity obligation that applies. And this is really a very significant obligation because it represents the substantial majority of your RA requirements here for Clean Energy Alliance. Because this is a resource constrained area, the CAISO has basically defined it as such, and there are various others throughout the state in the Bay Area. There's an LA Basin local area that's been defined as well. But here in San Diego, because of the resource constraints that exist, most of the capacity that you procure needs to be purchased from generators that are physically located here within the San Diego Imperial Valley area. And then moving into the month ahead process, I should say for local capacity, that is a multi-year obligation. So as we approach this October 31st deadline in 2025, we'll need to have met 100% of our local RA obligation in 26, 100% in 27, and 50% in 2028. So it's a pretty rigorous obligation that needs to be attended to. So just keep that in mind. And then as we move into the month ahead process, there's basically a 6-month lead time for each operating month. So for example, by mid-April, we just recently, as a matter of fact, submitted our June compliance materials. So demonstrating compliance with that particular month. And then that just rolls forward over time. So as we move into mid-May, we'll be demonstrating compliance for July and so on and so forth throughout the year. But during that month ahead process, we need to top off. So move from 90% in the year ahead up to 100% of our prescribed obligation throughout that transition. And then of course, based on the load forecast that set these obligations, our RA obligations, by month, they will vary. So there's different levels of capacity that are procured as we move throughout the year. So mentioned slice of day and that framework that's now in place here in California. And this is, I think, a helpful chart here to give you an idea of how that particular obligation is measured when compliance is evaluated. So you can see the dotted line, which represents your hourly obligation. So this is a 24-hour period, each bar representing one of those hours. And you can see that those nodes overlay each hour of the day. And that particular obligation you'll see kind of starts at one point in the first hour of the day, drops a little bit in the middle of the day, and then comes up to a peak in the evening before it starts falling off again. Now the bar here, which is a stack bar, represents the different purchases that you've made of resource adequacy capacity to meet that need. And you'll see in some hours you exceed the mandate, right? Because the nature of the resources that you've procured don't vary by hour. So this might be, say, a natural gas generating facility that is intended to operate 24 hours a day. So you realize RA benefits from that resource across each of the 24 hours. But when that RA obligation peaks in the evening, you'll see that it goes beyond the capabilities of those generators that you've placed under contract. So other resources come into play at that particular point. And in this case, energy storage or battery storage is particularly helpful in meeting that peak as it steps up in those evening hours. So this is really just intended to demonstrate how the different contracts that you've layered in your portfolio eventually help meet that particular RA procurement obligation. And the nice thing about battery storage is that even though it's only available over a limited number of hours, you can kind of move it around and help it match up with your obligation as it changes throughout the year. All right, a little bit more about energy products, and in this case, markets, and how they've evolved over the last while, because this will play heavily into the rates discussion and budget discussion, of course. So we'll start first with energy, the energy commodity that I mentioned, one of the fundamental products that need to be purchased in order to serve load and the load of your customers here at CEA. The good news here when it comes to buying energy in California is that we're in a declining market, which is great. So as you go out and you buy additional energy to meet the needs of your customers, you're doing so at a lower cost than you were a year ago, and in fact, about 34% lower. Now, energy prices here in the state are largely connected with natural gas prices as the key input for the marginal cost of generation. And when we're in an environment like we are now, where gas prices are very low, gas storage is ample, and weather forecasts don't indicate that there's anything unusual on the horizon, then we see suppressed pricing as we're seeing right now. So this is a really good point in history buying electric power. Of course, that can change, right? So if we get weather systems that are unexpected as we move into the summer, if it's unexpected heat, that can put upward pressure on pricing. And then if we were to deplete storage levels coming out of winter, for example, then that could also put upward pressure on pricing. But right now, because storage is ample, gas prices are low, and there really aren't any unexpected weather tendencies on the horizon, we're really in a nice low energy price environment. The same can't be said recently for resource adequacy and also renewable energy. So these are independent markets. And in the case of resource adequacy pricing, we had a kind of unprecedented price spike, or pricing environment generally, I should say, over the last couple of years. And you can see in the line chart here, we kind of reflect back on where prices were in January of 2023, and then about kind of these 9 or 10 month steps that we've taken out to March of 2025. And you'll see that back in June of 2024, we had historically, I mean, the highest prices I've ever seen. I've been working in this industry almost 27 years, and it's not even close. The way prices ran up to over $100 a kilowatt month during the summer. I think it's worth noting here that you can probably tell from the slope of these lines that during these shoulder months, if you will, so January through April, and then also November and December, where there's ample resources online, pricing is typically suppressed during those months of the year. And then as you move into the summer, that May through September period, that's really where resources tend to be more constrained. Weather is typically hotter, and those RA obligations increase. So there's larger demand on the system. And of course, that imposes higher prices on those that need to buy this particular product. But in any case, we've come off those high prices, thankfully, and we're starting to move in a good direction. It wasn't too long ago that annual strips of resource adequacy were trading at costs above $40 a kilowatt month, and we're now seeing prices down below $10 a kilowatt month for annual strips, which is really great news. We'd like to see it go lower, and we believe that prices will as additional infrastructure build out occurs. But this is really important context because as we consider budgetary pressures and rate-related pressures, these particular instances where prices were pushed up were particularly impactful to load-serving entities, and Clean Energy Alliance, of course, as one of those entities, was subject to these high prices. Renewable energy and just clean energy, generally speaking, has really been exposed to some very similar tendencies in the recent past. You can see here we've kind of laid out both large hydro and PCC1 or bucket one renewable energy in the two bar charts that you're looking at, dating back to January of 2023. Bucket one prices were under $20, just under $20 a megawatt hour. And then we saw this little step up that started happening as we moved deeper into 2023 and then into 2024 in particular, where prices really reached all-time highs. It was something that mirrored very much what we saw in the last slide with resource adequacy. There was a sense that some of the largest buyers of renewable energy in the state, in particular, a couple of the investor-owned utilities, were short relative to their compliance needs. Suppliers, I think, took advantage of this, quite frankly, and held back supply. They were basically allowing load-serving entities to bid amongst themselves, bid against themselves, driving up prices to levels that we simply hadn't seen before, nearly $100 a megawatt hour back in September of last year. Since that time, prices have come down quite a lot, almost down to the levels that we saw back in 2023. And I think it's worth noting that the point of reference here when you look at these prices is 2025 delivered renewable energy. So right now, as we look out into the future, we're seeing 2026 and 2027 prices trade a bit higher than these levels, but it's still lower than it was several months ago. And then the same phenomenon trajectory has been observed with large hydroelectric prices, which generally mirror those of renewable energy, because oftentimes as renewable energy prices increase, load-serving entities will opt out of renewable energy to the extent they can and buy large hydroelectricity instead. It's just simply a cheaper commodity, relatively speaking, but it's still zero carbon like most renewable energy sources. So those that have lofty environmental objectives will often rotate out of renewable energy and into hydroelectricity. But in any case, these prices are coming down. But in the recent past, those high prices certainly affected the budgets and ultimately rates of load-serving entities, including Clean Energy Alliance.
Thank you, Kirby. Unless there's any questions, I'll lead right into the rate setting and rate design, or sorry, the rate premium rate design. So as was just shown, the cost of energy escalated quite a bit in 2024. And as a result, coming out of the summer last year, well, two things happened. One, as you may recall, our net position was drastically impacted, our projected net position at the end of last fiscal year, by those really, really high energy costs. But then as we were moving into the fall and we were thinking about the premiums for which Green Impact Plus and Green Impact customers currently pay, we thought, okay, we need to revisit this, because part of our obligation to not only as an operating entity, but also to JP Morgan, who's our credit support, is that we set our rates to cover our costs. Right now, as you are aware, we have 3 products: Clean Impact, which is a 50% renewable product; Clean Impact Plus, which is at which the base rate is set at the Clean Impact rate or Clean Impact product. Then we have Clean Impact Plus, which is 75% carbon free, which has a premium of 0.1 cents per kilowatt hour. And then the Green Impact, which is the base rate plus 0.75 cents per kilowatt hour. And as we're going to look at in the next couple of slides, one of which is you've already seen, renewable and carbon-free energy prices rose substantially and have come back down almost to 2023 levels, in some cases less. And so this has lessened that gap, that concern that we had in the fall, that we needed to look at adjusting our premiums to cover our costs. So again, you've seen this slide, and you can see here in September 2024 where prices were both renewable and carbon-free, large hydro. And so, current pricing is much lower. We're looking at $12 to $25 per megawatt hour for renewable and $12 to $20 for carbon-free. And then in the blue box below that, it shows an example of translating that cost to rate premiums. Right now, the Green Impact product is 100% renewable. And so 50% of that, at which the Clean Impact rate is, times the average dollar per megawatt hour for renewable energy equals $10 per megawatt hour, which translates to $10 per 1 cent per kilowatt hour, which is slightly higher actually than the current premium we're charging for Green Impact. With the way prices are continuing to come down still, rather than look at right now increasing any premiums, what we thought we would put before the board, and by the way, the Risk Oversight Committee reviewed this at their meeting in March and recommended support of this rate design, would be to set Clean Impact Plus, which is our default product, and it's the overwhelmingly most enrolled product, at the base rate. Clean Impact customers would then see minus 0.34 cents per kilowatt hour, and the Green Impact would see a premium of 0.65. So essentially, we're just moving the base rate to the Clean Impact Plus. We're not proposing to increase any of those, the premium to either the Clean Impact Plus or Green Impact. And the benefit would be slightly better for the credit to Clean Impact. You can see there the percentage change at 0.6%. That's a small benefit, but it is a lower rate for at today's rates for the Clean Impact product. So our recommendation is to have a discussion with the board, see if the board is amenable to us bringing back. This would be a rate setting hearing because we would be essentially changing the rate design and reorganizing the base rate to be centered around the Clean Impact Plus product. At that time, we'd also revisit the energy costs. We'd look at what our costs are and what the cost of energy is and what whether or not there'd need to be any adjustment, but we don't foresee that to be the case. If we were to do so today, we would have no rate increases as a result of this, or for the premium anyway. So looking for your discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
And by the way, sorry, if you have any questions for Kirby on the discussion that he had, he's happy to answer as well.
Thank you. Great description of resource adequacy. Thank you for briefing us on this potential rate redesign. Do we have any public comments on this item?
We do not have any speakers on this item.
I'll put it to my board. Vice Chair Garcia.
I don't have any comments. I'll just move to approve, and then second, and we could discuss.
Thank you.
Maybe just
Do we have
turning it
any
around.
Further comments in a second on this side?
I'm so glad there's not a test, Kirby. That was a lot.
Yes, sir.
So we've had a lot today, but I appreciate all that information. I'm kind of confused. Would this rate setting then be the rates for 2026, 27, or 25? Would it be a whole year, or not sure?
The question, good question, but the objective would be to come back in the fall sometime. We need Calpine to set up this rate structure for us. All we would be doing essentially is moving the clean impact plus rate to the base rate, so that that rate would essentially, well, there'd be no rate increase as a result of that. There'd be no rate increase or premium increase for clean impact, green impact. The only thing that would change is that the credit to opt down to 50% renewable, the clean impact product, would be slightly less based on today's prices. Now, again, what we're asking you to support today is just the rate design. So the base rate would be set at the Clean Impact Plus product, and then from which you'd have a rate decrease or credit for the 50% clean impact and a rate premium for the green impact. So at this point, if we were to do this today, the rate setting would only be changing the structure of the rates and modifying the rate schedule to make that clear that that's the base product, if that makes sense.
Okay, I think I can support that, second that motion. I do another thing from the climate and resiliency of Solana Beach. They wanted me to ask you, what would be the process for a city putting their city in the default product, the green impact product, as opposed to what it is right now? Is there a process for that? Is there a time that you recommend?
Basically, we're establishing a policy for that right now and a procedure for which cities can set their default product at the higher 100% renewable. Essentially, it would require that city to take an action to proactively say, we want to set this default rate, after which CEA would take it up as a board to support that. At the same time, and before that action by the board, we would do a cost analysis to make sure that the procurement of that resource for that city and that load would be covered by the rates we're charging. Part of the reason we wanted to take this discussion to the board first was to get ahead of that potential. A city the size of Solana Beach, I would, without Dan or Kirby saying otherwise, I think we could handle that more than likely with under the current rate structure. However, we'd still want to analyze it to make sure that we're still covering the cost, because the more renewable energy we're buying in the portfolio, the higher the cost. So, but if a larger load city wanted to do this, we would have to be careful about what that meant and what that meant to rates. Part of the policy we've talked about is whether or not to limit those kinds of changes to one city per year for that reason, or set a load cap in terms of if two cities, Del Mar and Solana Beach, for example, were to suggest that might be accomplished in the same year because of the size of the load. Whereas another city with a higher load may not be able to do that in the same year. So we're still refining the policy, and we will be bringing it forward. And
would that require a whole noticing to the entire city again, that you're now in a different category, you can opt down? A whole new noticing?
That, I believe, would be up to the city to make sure that their customers are being made aware of that. I think, we can discuss with you offline how best to accomplish that. But I think a fair assessment would be that to notifying your customers of that impending change would be a proactive and potentially required step. There's nothing in the current legislation of which I'm aware that requires a certain procedure to do that. But because it would be a change to your customers' rates and increasing by that premium, you may want to consider, and we could put something in the policy about this, the same type of notification that you engaged in when you launched your program, which is 2 notices ahead of that change and then 2 notices following the change. The thing that doesn't change, however, is that, again, of which I'm aware, and we've done a little bit of research into this, is the ability to opt out would not be the same as when you're initially launching. So you would still be subject to the rules that apply to a customer today who would say, okay, I don't want to do that. I'm going to opt out. I don't know that that's going to be as big a potential or larger potential as somebody saying, okay, I'm going to opt down to the Clean Impact Plus product if that's the default. Because
Okay.
they'd still have that opportunity to opt down to the other two products.
Right. Okay, thank you for that. And again, I second that motion.
Thank you. Any other comments this way? Great. I wanted to say, Greg, I support limiting large agencies from making those significant changes, especially with our resource adequacy needing to be secured for 3 years. I just don't want to put us in a difficult position because, there's different ambitions amongst our cities. I think in time, people can transfer over, but we have to at least guard against some instability there. So we'll go ahead and go for a vote, please.
Thank you. Board Member Spellich.
Aye.
Board Member Bot Patel.
Aye.
Board Member Becker.
Yes.
Alternate Board Member Sinella.
Yes.
Vice Chair Garcia.
Yes.
Chair Melendez.
Aye. Great. That's everyone. Thank you very much. And finally, we'll go to item 9, which is an amendment to our CEO contract. You put this one right at the end so you could wear us out, right, Greg?
So I'll go ahead and start. I was part of the subcommittee for Greg's evaluation, along with Board Member Bot Patel and Vice Chair Garcia. We made our recommendations and went to the board, and we're happy to report that we got unanimous approval for a 5% salary increase with a 3-year contract extension. And part of the, yeah, and just part of the things that I quickly jotted down, Greg, your performance does merit a salary adjustment because you've really stepped into this role, and there was a seamless transition between you and our former CEO. You were instrumental in rolling out 4 new cities for us, hiring expert staff, keeping the board apprised of even when it was bad news, the rates going up, but just keeping us informed of everything. And also the success with the Solar Plus program that you rolled out, again, seamlessly. So I'm happy to report, and we all feel very confident that you're going to keep performing and lead us to our 100% GHG-free energy by 2035. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Do we have any public comments on this item?
We do not have any speakers on this item.
All right, I would absolutely make a motion. Thank you so much, Member Becker, and for all the subcommittee members. I'd absolutely make a motion to accept the recommendation and to amend our CEO's agreement with those advancements for him. It's been wonderful working with you. I agree. It's been a seamless transition and very effective time that you've had here so far. Any other comments and a second on that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you. All right, let's take a vote.
Board Member Spellich.
Aye.
Board Member.
Aye.
Board Member Becker.
Yes.
Alternate Board Member Sinella.
Yes.
Vice Chair Garcia.
Yes.
Chair Melendez.
Aye. Thank you. And with our final moments here, do we have any requests for future agenda items? Seeing none, our next meeting is on May 29th. here in
Chair?
the- Yes, sir.
Yeah, this isn't a request for a board item, but I did want to mention that this is Kaylin McCauley's last meeting with CEA.
Oh,
And I did want to say thank you very much to her. Like I said before, we can't replace her, but we can hopefully find somebody who can, do at least half as well as she did in this capacity. I've enjoyed my time working with her, as have all of our staff. She's exceptional. She's moving on into healthcare, nursing field, and that just speaks to the kind of person she is and she's been for us. So congratulations and thank you for your time here.
fantastic.
I would
Thank
make a
you,
motion
Taylor.
to wish her well.
Wonderful work. And in your honor, we are adjourned. Thank you.
This is a big one. Sorry to Mike. Mike's about